Gunfire erupted beneath the Charles Bridge as a shadowy figure fled with a briefcase. Operation Midnight had lasted 18 months, jeopardizing 37 agents and $2.4 million in intelligence. Yet the microfilm's encryption matched a 1983 Soviet cipher, used only by KGB operatives stationed in East Berlin. The dead drop box, hidden under a rusted bridge near the Vltava River, had been tampered with by someone inside the White House. Among the 12 names on the list was First Lady Eleanor Whitmore's German Shepherd, a diplomatic envoy turned double agent. 3 U.S. agents were dead. 17 operatives exposed. The leak traced to a routine meeting between a U.S. diplomat and a KGB officer at a cafe near the American embassy. The diplomat's name, Anna Petrov, 34 U.S. State Department analyst, no known ties to foreign intelligence. Her apartment in Washington had been searched. A hidden compartment in her bookshelf held Soviet propaganda and a KGB ID card. A coded message, intercepted by the CIA's Signals Intelligence Division, placed her at the center of the breach. Petrov had arrived in the U.S. in 1978, fleeing the Soviet purges. Her father's execution had left her with a vendetta. The CIA recruited her in 1980, trusting her fluency in Russian. But her dead drops began in 1981, using a hollowed-out Pushkin book in Vienna's Schönbrunn Park. The KGB officer who met her there was Viktor Kovalyov. His file, declassified in 2010, showed he'd targeted defectors with a Stockholm Syndrome playbook. Petrov's first exchange was March 12, 1981. By 1983, her betrayal had unraveled a mission. The CIA's safe house in Prague now held her a single photograph on the wall, Petrov, smiling beside her father before the purges. The microfilm in the box had her name scrawled in red ink. The clock struck 3:15. The interrogation began. The knock came at 3:07 a.m. On a rain-slicked street in Prague. A dead drop box under a bridge had been tampered with. Inside, microfilm, smudged with fingerprints, revealing a list of 12 names. Operation Midnight covert mission to intercept Soviet nuclear codes had been compromised. 3 U.S. agents were dead. 17 operatives exposed. The leak traced to a routine meeting between a U.S. diplomat and a KGB officer at a cafe near the American embassy. The diplomat's name, Anna Petrov, 34 U.S. State Department analyst, no known ties to foreign intelligence. Her apartment in Washington had been searched. A hidden compartment in her bookshelf held Soviet propaganda and a KGB ID card. A coded message intercepted by the CIA's Signals Intelligence Division placed her at the center of the breach. Petrov had arrived in the U.S. in 1978, fleeing the Soviet purges. Her father's execution had left her with a vendetta. The CIA recruited her in 1980, trusting her fluency in Russian. But her dead drops began in 1981, using a hollowed-out Pushkin book in Vienna's Schönbrunn Park. The KGB officer who met her there was Viktor Kovalyov. His file, declassified in 2010, showed he'd targeted defectors with a Stockholm Syndrome playbook. Petrov's first exchange was March 12, 1981. By 1983, her betrayal had unraveled a mission. The CIA's safe house in Prague now held her. A single photograph on the wall, Petrov smiling beside her father before the purges. The microfilm in the box had her name scrawled in red ink. The clock struck 3:15. The interrogation began, but there was one detail that didn't make sense, and no one noticed it yet. James Carter, Petrov's CIA handler, had vanished in 1982. His last known location? A Moscow safe house. His file, sealed until 2018, revealed he'd been monitoring a KGB defector who claimed to have been tortured by the CIA. Petrov's colleagues described her as a model employee who never missed a meeting. In 1981, Anna Petrov met Viktor Kovalyov in Vienna's Schönbrunn Park, where the KGB had set up a dead drop using a hollowed-out copy of Pushkin's Eugene Onegin. Kovalyov, a KGB counterintelligence officer, had studied Petrov's file for years, noting her fluency in Russian and her trauma over her father's execution. He approached her with a proposition. The KGB would protect her from the CIA if she provided information on U.S. operations. Petrov, still reeling from her father's death, was vulnerable. Kovalyov exploited this, weaving a narrative that the CIA had orchestrated her father's execution as part of a purge to silence dissent. He promised her a new life in exchange for secrets. The first exchange occurred on March 12, 1981. Petrov left a microfilm containing details of Operation Midnight in the Pushkin book, which Kovalyov retrieved hours later. A declassified KGB memo from 2010 reveals Kovalyov's strategy. He used a psychological manipulation technique dubbed the Stockholm Syndrome playbook, forcing Petrov to believe the KGB was her only ally. He fed her lies about CIA torture chambers and fabricated evidence of her father's treason, convincing her she was a victim of U.S. imperialism. Her CIA handler, James Carter, remained unaware of her betrayal until his sudden disappearance in 1982. A 1983 CIA counterintelligence memo, redacted until 2018, notes Carter had been monitoring a KGB defector who claimed to have been tortured by the CIA. The defector, later identified as a KGB plant, had allegedly confessed to Carter that Petrov was being manipulated, but Carter vanished before he could report this, leaving no trace in Moscow's safe houses. Investigators later found his passport in a Prague hotel, dated February 14, 1982, 2 weeks before his disappearance. But what investigators discovered next changed everything. A hidden ledger in Kovalyov's KGB file, uncovered in 2015, showed Petrov's recruitment was part of a larger operation to infiltrate U.S. intelligence. The KGB had predicted her betrayal years before it happened. Petrov's psychological unraveling began in 1982, when the weight of her choices first crept into her sleep. FBI interviews, declassified in 2005, reveal she confessed to waking in a cold sweat, her hands trembling as she gripped a .38 revolver beneath her pillow. "I told myself I was protecting the U.S., she said in one session, voice hollow. But every night, I saw my father's face in the mirror." Her CIA colleagues described her as a ghost in the agency, present but distant, her eyes always scanning for threats that didn't exist. The hidden diary, found in her Washington apartment after her arrest, revealed a fractured mind. A 1983 entry read, "I am a traitor, but I am also a patriot. To the KGB, I am a weapon. To the US, I am a ghost." The words were scrawled in shaky ink, the paper stained with coffee and tears. In Sofia, Bulgaria, she rented a villa under the alias Elena Markov, a translator for a Soviet cultural exchange program. Bulgarian intelligence later confirmed the villa was a KGB hub, its walls lined with maps of U.S. embassies and files on American operatives. Her tradecraft was meticulous. Coded messages were hidden in Russian poetry, their meanings deciphered by Kovalyov's team. Microfilm, no larger than a fingernail, was disguised in hollowed-out cigarette cases. One such case was found in a Moscow subway station in 1983, its contents exposing Petrov's role in Operation Midnight. The KGB had anticipated her betrayal, but not the depth of her guilt. In a 1984 KGB memo, Kovalyov wrote, "She is a weapon that has turned against itself. Her mind is a battlefield." The final piece of her double life was a dead drop in the Sofia woods, a birch tree hollowed to hold a microfilm containing the names of 12 U.S. agents. It was there in the rustling leaves that her deception began to collapse. Petrov was arrested in Prague on May 15, 1983, after the CIA traced the tampered dead drop to her. Interrogators found her in a safe house near the Vltava River, her hands trembling as she clutched a hollowed-out Pushkin book. She was flown to Moscow for trial, where a closed Soviet court sentenced her to 20 years in a gulag. Her U.S. colleagues were devastated. John Mercer, a CIA analyst, later told a 1984 Senate committee, "She was the person we trusted the most. We never saw it coming." Operation Midnight collapsed entirely, leaving 3 U.S. agents dead and 17 operatives exposed. The CIA restructured its counterintelligence division in 1984, implementing stricter vetting procedures and installing biometric scans for dead drops. In a 2015 declassified interview, Kovalyov admitted Petrov's betrayal was the most valuable asset the KGB ever had. He described her as a woman who believed in a cause greater than herself, even if that cause was the destruction of the US. But the final revelation came in 2020, when a Russian archive uncovered Petrov's hidden diary. Inside, she wrote, "My father was not executed. The KGB made him disappear. They framed him as a traitor to break me. I was never their pawn, I was their weapon, and I used it against them." The diary confirmed her father had been a minor Soviet official, not a purged dissident. His execution was a KGB fabrication, a psychological weapon to manipulate her. The last page of her diary, dated March 1983, read, "I will never forgive them for making me a monster, but I will never forget the faces of the ones I betrayed." Her sentence was later commuted in 1991, and she died in a Moscow psychiatric ward in 1998. Her final words, "Tell them I was never their enemy." The CIA's files on her remain sealed, but one memo, dated 1985, chillingly notes, "Petrov's betrayal was not a failure of intelligence, it was a failure of trust."